Hey there, this is Coach Aaron Saft on the MR Runningpains podcast, and today's guest is Jeremy Peyton. Jeremy is a great story, a great human being. Just some really cool things to share with us. We talk about Jeremy's first 50K. Jeremy came to running really recently, as you'll hear in his story, and decided to take on the Art Loeb as his first 50K. And if you're not familiar with the Art Loeb, that is quite the undertaking for anyone's first 50K. But Jeremy was prepared, not only physically, but as you'll hear, he prepared in every which way possible. Getting, gear together, nutrition, hydration. So we talk about all of that, and that's what I love about this episode. Jeremy had a lot to share, and we kind of bounce off each other and talk about things that maybe you can pull into your own running. Not only if you're doing your first ultra, your first 50K, your first adventure run, just moving up in distance. This was, such a fun conversation in the regard that we just go over so much stuff. So there's a lot in here. So I hope you take something away. And if it, develops any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Both of our contacts will be in the show notes. And I hope you really enjoyed this conversation with Jeremy Peyton. At the end, I'll catch up with all of you about what's going on here in my world. And until then, let's hear from Jeremy. Hey, Jeremy, how are you?
Aaron, how's it going? Fantastic.
Excellent, sir. Excellent. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, why don't we get into a little bit about you? Why don't you tell us who is Jeremy Peyton, and what is his origin story?
Well, I'm originally from South Louisiana. Spent a lot of time traveling around the country with my mom, my little sister. Joined the military in 1992 after graduating high school in Denver, Colorado.
Which branch did you join?
I was in the Navy for 12 years.
Wow.
So, yeah, I was in a helicopter squadron, aviation ordnance. So mostly doing weapons, stationed all around the world, a couple of tours in the Middle East. Lots of cruises. So pretty exciting 20s and 30s. Got out in 2005 on an injury. I was injured on active duty, so I was medically separated in 2005 in San Diego, and moved back to Jacksonville, Florida, with my ex-spouse, working as a service advisor at car dealerships. In 2013, I decided I needed more outdoor in my life, so decided to pursue a degree in forestry at Haywood Community College up in Clyde, North Carolina.
Cool.
Graduated from Haywood in 2016, and worked with the U.S. Forest Service for about 3 years after that. In different capacities as a wildland firefighter, did a lot of silviculture, hemlock treatments, worked at Bent Creek on a couple of research projects, worked with the MPS at the Carl Sandburg home. 2018, I decided to go back into aviation. That's what I do now. I'm a property and facilities manager for Signature Aviation. We are the largest fixed base operator in the world. We have 206 locations in 26 countries, and I manage North America, Canada, Latin America, and the Caribbean.
Wow. Well, before we go any further, I want to say thank you for your service, man. That's incredible, especially being injured on duty. So we appreciate you being there for us. So thank you, sir. That's a whirlwind of a life thus far, and you're not that old.
That's true.
That's amazing. So talk to us about what brought you into running.
Well, I've been a mountain biker since 2004. Did a lot of running when I was in the military, not by choice, but moving up here, getting into a different role with work and having more time in the area that I'm close to now, which is around the Arboretum, I saw the need for me to get out and try something different. I felt like I was stagnating in the mountain biking world. I'd ridden just about everything and the groups were fantastic, but I wanted some variety in my life. And one of my friends said, well, maybe you should try trail running. And I said, that sounds like a great idea. Let me try that. So June of last year, I decided, okay, let me update some shoes and go out for a couple of runs and see how it feels.
Right on. Right on. And how did it feel?
Felt really good. The one thing that I noticed, the differences between mountain biking and running is the contact with the earth, right? So mountain biking, it's not as much tactile as running is. I feel more connected to the ground when I'm running as opposed to being high up on a bike. Um, Plus, I think you get to see more because you're traveling a little bit slower. So it gives you the opportunity to notice things that you haven't noticed before.
Absolutely. Well, um, you have a grand vision for next year. Do you want to talk about that and how that came about and what our connection to that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll be turning 50 years old next year, and I wanted to do something that was important to me, something that I've wanted to do for probably a year and a half now. So I contacted a company in Chamonix called Run the Alps, run by Doug Mayer, and signed up to do the UTMB course next year in September of 24. It's a 10-day trip, 9 days running, and we circumnavigate Mont Blanc using the actual UTMB course. It's 104 miles, 28,000 feet of elevation. As I said, 9 days running, 1 day off. And to me, this is like a bucket list opportunity, not so much for the distance or for the elevation, but being in the Alps for 9 days and being able to run that course in daylight and see all the mountains and being connected with runners from around the world is exactly how I want to spend my 50th year on this planet.
That's great. And so we connected, um, and I think it was Carrie Barris, right, that connected us.
Yeah, yeah, Carrie, Teresa, and a couple other people in the running community said you should talk to Aaron.
Because you came and you said, do you think this is something I can do? Um, which at the time when we connected, your longest run to date was what at that time?
Half marathon.
Half marathon. Okay. Which is great. And I said, well, we have time, right? But in the meantime, you've tackled some great stuff. Do you want to talk about some stuff that you've already done this year?
Yeah, so I started up a run group on Facebook about 3 months ago and started doing it's called Sunday Run Day Fun Day runs where we pick loops that are not really on anybody's list so far. So I try and put together runs in Shining Rock, Middle Prong. We do bucket list runs. We ran up to Mount LeConte and back. Um, just stuff that people haven't really seen, getting them out to places where they might really not be comfortable traveling on their own. Last Saturday, I actually took a group out and we ran Art Loeb northbound, which was my first 50K attempt. Um, After only running for less than a year, I decided, well, I've got this fantastic trail. I've got all these great people, lots of good support. So we decided to take off on it Saturday morning at about 5:45 in the morning and um, ended up finishing at about 6:20 in the evening. A lot more elevation than I had originally thought, but a fantastic run. And I felt really strong at the halfway point when we stopped at Silver Mine to refuel. It was odd to me because I had never really pushed past about 18 miles. I think at that time, 30K was about longest, I did the Cold Mountain
Right.
30K.
Yep.
So getting out to Silvermind, I was like, wow, okay, so this is officially my longest run. And by mile 20, I felt strange. Like I felt energized and like I had hit my stride. And at 20 miles, I felt like I had just started to run. So climbing up to Black Balsam, hitting Tenant Mountain, going upstairs, down to Cold Mountain Gap, for me was probably the best part of the run. And hitting hitting that last 3.8 miles, heading down to Camp Daniel Boone, it was it was a hard 3.8 miles, but it was so worth it. And being able to tick off that 50K in such a short amount of time was a bucket list opportunity for me.
And you talked about the Sunday group. And we're going to talk about Art Loeb a bit more, of course, but where did the impetus for that originate? Where did you kind of start? I mean, because you mentioned earlier that the mountain bike community and group rides and stuff were wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Was that something that you just wanted to kind of translate to running, or was it built off something else?
Yeah, so it was it was really self-serving to begin with because I wanted to have people to run with, and I wanted to check off a bunch of runs that I wanted to do. So I started posing these runs to people and saying, okay, here's the loop that I put together on Trail Forks or on Trail Runner Project. What do you guys think? What are your thoughts? So, and it just kind of snowballed after that. And then, as you know, you tell one person and they tell somebody else, and then they tell somebody else. And next thing you know, you've got 8 to 10 people in your group, and everybody is messaging you asking what's the next run. Perfect example was Mount LeConte. I had people messaging me probably for 2 weeks after that run, and people were saying stuff like, I'm still high from that run. And that run was so amazing to me. And it was so awesome to be in that place with those people. It was just one of those days that just clicked. So to me, that's the gold. That's what I get most of my joy from is putting people into the woods and connecting them with other people and saying, "Hey, look, let's go run something that you might not necessarily put on your run list."
Sure. Yeah. Let's kind of get into the Art Loeb building off of that. So, LeConte happens and people are asking you, well, what's next? And Art Loeb evolves and it becomes, let's do Art Loeb. So, um, when you initially put that to the group, um, what was your organizational strategy? How did you start with, this is our next one? I mean, you announce it, right? But then from there, where did it go?
Well, we decided that the best thing to do is once we have the group that has mentioned that they want to run, I thought it'd be good to get everybody together ahead of time, about 2 weeks, to start planning
Oh,
what
Jeremy, sorry.
safeties do we have in place.
Can you
Okay.
repeat that? Sorry, you broke up there.
Oh, yeah. So we did a 2 week pre-run meeting where to talk about mandatory gear, what they would need, what safeties we had in place, where our SAGs were set. For me, bringing 8 people onto a trail and kind of taking responsibility for them, I thought it was good to get everyone together and kind of talk strategy. Like, what's our pace going to be? What are the things that we're going to need? What should you have packed? You going to be responsible for? Ultimately, running's very singular until you start doing run groups, and then you have to remind people, hey, you have to be responsible for you. Like, I'm responsible to make sure that the group is okay, but you need to think about yourself and like, what am I going to do to make myself safe? And what am I going to do to make sure that I have what I need to complete this run?
Right. And so what were some of those things that you guys discussed? Because, obviously the Art Loeb, it can be pretty self-reliant. Now, obviously you said you had a refuel point at Silvermine, but, talk about what some of the things that you were telling them, these are things to consider bringing.
Yeah, so after talking to you about fueling, I kind of put a plan together and said, so this is what I'm going to do. After talking with Aaron, these are the things that I want to bring. We talked about water. Like, are you going to run filters and flasks? Are you going to run a bladder? How many calories per hour do you think is important for you? And I use myself as a base. I tell them in my training, it's recommended that I take on about 250 calories an hour. Obviously, that's going to be different for everybody, but I had people talk through their process with me and say, "Hey, so, for me, I'm planning on bringing X, Y, and Z. I'm going to bring Uncrustables and I'm going to have stuff that I can eat like real food, make sure that I have enough nutrition, um, for solids and for liquids." And I told him about something that I learned from you about making sure you're stacking your sugars, which I've seen of a lot of progress in that in my own running by stacking my sugars. I noticed that, I'm able to sustain longer. Um, yeah, it's just been really, really helpful.
We'll just pause there because I'm sure some people aren't familiar with stacking sugars. But I'll just kind of explain that real quick. And that's looking at your sugar source in your fueling. What is it? Are you going primarily off of glucose? If so, then you may want to alternate your intakes with fructose. So, if you have for example, a goo gel that's basically primarily glucose based, and then have a spring gel thereafter in your next nutrition interval, which is fructose, it's two different sugar sources. So your body can process both at the same time. Whereas if you just continue to consume glucose, the body kind of backs up. It can't process more and more glucose. So giving it two different pathways allows you to ingest and digest two different sugar sources. Sorry, Jeremy, go ahead.
Nope, you're absolutely right. Um, yeah, for me, I started looking at different ways that I can both hydrate and I can sustain nutrition while on the trail, mixed around with a couple of different products, Huma, Scratch, Martin. I decided to utilize Martin's for the Art Loeb. The one thing that I really like about that product is, as you said, it stacks sugars because their bars are glucose, fructose, and maltodextrin. So high calorie count, um, just really worked well for me in that zone.
Awesome.
Um, yeah, I mixed tailwinds in my bag for hydration. Was able to refill with my water filter out of a flask. The water points were actually a lot better than everybody had mentioned. We had rain probably the week before, and a lot of the springs were running really well.
Did you have any sources that you could kind of rely on for those reports of, how the water flow was?
Yeah, I had a couple of people in the running community that had run it recently. And I utilized a lot of the reports from the Art Loeb Trail group on Facebook. People that are completing the trail are adamant about telling people, well, this is where you can get water. This is where you can't get water. We saw a bear here. There were snakes here. This section was hard. This section was easy. So I found that group to be very helpful in kind of planning out my water points.
Great, 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 awesome. And how about for mapping? There's this course is marked, it is blazed, but at the same time, there are some junctions that get pretty tricky and hairy, and can be difficult to find the
Mhm.
markings. Plus, you go through a wilderness area, which there are no markings in the wilderness area. So, how did
Right.
you work this with mapping and especially communicating that with the group?
Mhm.
Um, did you all have to stay together, or how did that work?
So I advise the group, everyone in the group, to run your own map. whatever you like to run, whether that be Trail Forks or Strava or Trail Run Project or whatever. Personally, I ran Trail Forks and I ran Gaia, and then I had the route saved on my Garmin. So I was running three different maps for tracking because you can utilize Trail Forks and Gaia in airplane mode, which saves the battery on your phone. I was using my Garmin for tracking heart rate and distance and for navigation, but sometimes the Garmin isn't as accurate as, say, Gaia or Trail Forks. So that was always used as a backup. I always back up everything. I always carry more water than I need, more food than I need. I always run more GPSs than I need. I also spoke with Tara Pruitt, and she let me borrow her Garmin InReach, which was great because it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Sure. The talk about the Garmin InReach for a moment. What peace of mind does that bring? What does that bring to the table for you guys?
So Garmin InReach is great when you don't have cell service and you're really back in the back country of Pisgah or any other area. It gives you the opportunity to reach out to emergency services when you may not be able to, or to reach out to that person that can reach out to emergency services. It's a great backstop, and it's a huge peace of mind to know that if somebody goes down with a femur fracture or a broken ankle or they break a hand or an arm, then you know that you can get that person aid. I was personally carrying a medical kit, so I had enough gauze and bandage in my kit to where I could snap two twigs and splint an injury pretty quickly to at least get somebody down. So we could fashion the ability to get somebody to an access point where medical services or emergency services could get to them.
Fantastic. A few things there I want to just kind of go back through. In relying on so many battery devices, was it one of the things that you suggested to the group to have backup power source, backup battery charging capacity?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a backup battery myself. I grabbed a Goal Zero to carry along. Added a little bit of weight, but that peace of mind, it's able to charge up to 6 cell phones off of one charge. So, I was basically carrying enough battery to charge everybody's gear. That was a good thing for me to carry. I know two other people in the group also were carrying backup batteries that were attached to their phones. So yeah, we do rely on a lot of battery operated items. It's always nice to carry a paper map, especially when you're in the backcountry. I found that if you don't have those paper map reading abilities like I do, I learned it, within forestry when I was working for the Forest Service. But for the people that don't, they tend to rely on that GPS, and if they're not using it properly, it can drain their battery, which can put them into kind of a situation where now you don't have your cell phone, so you can't call out. You don't have your GPS, so you don't know where you are. So yeah, I got the backup battery just for that aspect.
Perfect. Yeah, the Goal Zeros are fantastic. There's a billion different brands out there, and it just depends on what type of juice you want, to be able to charge. But I think one of the big things is not forget your cords.
Yeah.
We oftentimes remember the batteries, but a lot of times we're like, oh man, I didn't bring that cord. So
Yeah,
don't forget your cords.
absolutely.
Um, so I always encourage people to have paper maps. I think that's a great point, because just in case, like you said, back up to your backup, right? Like have a paper map. And then I encourage, for the extra expense to get the kind of the waterproof, tear-proof
Mhm.
maps. They are a little bit extra, but so worth it when they're in your pack and things get wet, because a non-waterproof map is pretty useless to you. And if you can't find a waterproof map, just, put it in some Ziploc bags just to make sure that you give it some resiliency or some kind of water resistance, to make
Mhm.
sure, because that's key if you really need it, to make sure that it's in good condition. So All good points. Thank you, Jeremy. Um, the other touch point I wanted to go over, you talked a little bit about your med kit. What did your med kit entail? What did you pack?
So I was utilizing a single person med kit that I picked up from REI. Lots of gauze, bandages, band-aids, Neosporin, um, different sutures, blood clot kit. So if somebody has a laceration, we had the quick clot.
Mhm.
So, I tried to think of all the things that I learned when I was in the military, plan for the worst and hope for the best.
Yep.
So as I was going through the process of getting my stuff together, I thought, what could possibly happen? Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? So I thought laceration, broken bone. Um, those were my two big catch points. So after speaking to a couple of people that have done some pretty long runs, they said, you can get these quick clots. They're pretty inexpensive. You can throw them in your bag. If something does happen, you've got that ability to break open the quick clot and at least stop the bleeding. So I thought that was pretty important to have that, and the ability to make a splint and break sticks to give somebody a walking stick that they can lean on and have a splint for an ankle or a splint for an arm or something like that.
Awesome. Perfect. Um, what other, items did you have as, I would say like emergency items? What else did you carry with you?
Ooh, well, I carried a little extra food, a bag of liquid IV, and a couple of frozen Snickers bars that obviously thawed and then refroze once we got up a little bit higher. But I utilized those as bonk breakers. So those really high caloric foods, lots of sugar, something that can get you out of your doldrums as you're going up Pilot Mountain and wondering why they stack these switchbacks so tight and so close together.
Absolutely. Anything else? Emergency blanket.
Yep, definitely had an emergency blanket. When everybody came over the 2 weeks prior, that's one thing that I mentioned to the team. I said, does everybody have an emergency blanket? And they're like, no. And I said, well, I was looking for an emergency blanket for events, and they only sold them in packs of 10. So I have a pack of 10. So if anybody doesn't have one, let me know and I'll grab one for you and you can put it in your pack. That you don't really think about an emergency blanket until you maybe are going a little bit slower and the sun's going down and it starts to drizzle and now it's 40 degrees and you go outside and you're like, man, I could use some warmth right about now.
Yeah.
So yeah, emergency blankets are key. I basically utilize the same mandatory kits that a lot of the races that I run used. Um, I basically just copied that list and said, okay, so this is what you need. Make sure you've got a rain jacket, like a lightweight rain jacket. Make sure you've got an emergency blanket. Make sure your headlamp is charged. Make sure you've got your emergency foodstuffs. Make sure that you have what you need in your drop bag. Make sure
Yeah.
your drop bag is stocked with what you're going to need to resupply. The person that we had to resupply, she's awesome. She's been running with me since February, and she did an amazing job because when we got up there to Silver Mine, a lot of us were frozen, couldn't use our hands very well. So she was unzipping bags and filling up water bottles and filling up flasks. And she brought up a couple of extra pizzas. So we had pizza, and I brought little cans of Coke in a cooler. But it's those things that you don't plan for. When you get up there, how are you going to support yourself? It's not her job. She was kind enough to step up and say, hey, what do you need? How can I help you? But ultimately, that's the point that I made, is that you have to be responsible for you. You know,
Yep.
this is something that you've decided to undertake. And yeah, I tried to make that point as much as possible.
And just to add to that, in my emergency kit when I go, backcountry or long adventure, in my emergency blanket bag, it usually comes in a small Ziploc bag. I drop a small lighter just in case I need to build a fire, just in case anything happens. I also include a little pen knife, just a little pocket knife, just in case I need, for whatever reason, making kindling, whatever.
Right.
It's in there. And then if my pack doesn't have it, I include an emergency whistle. Um,
Okay.
so those are just little things that I drop into that because it all fits in that bag.
Oh yeah.
Um, and it's simple stuff and it can save your life. So just, other things, not only for yourself, but others to consider when they're going, deep into the woods and anything can happen, right?
Right.
Especially a lot of times I'm alone. I mean, I've got a Garmin inReach as well, so I can call for help, but God forbid it takes them hours to get to me. If I'm
Hmm.
sitting there and I can't move and I need to keep warm, I have a lot of that stuff just to, make sure that I can, sustain myself at least for a few hours, especially, if I'm cold.
Right.
Um, but just little things. But you have what sounds like quite a pack. Talk about your pack for a moment. Which pack do you have, and how do you load that sucker?
Yeah. So I run two different packs. I normally run the Solomon, the Advanced Skin 5
Mhm.
for my shorter runs, but for anything longer, I have the 12 liter, which I know you have one as well. And I find that pack to be the most versatile, comfortable, well-designed pack for my frame that I've ever run in. Normally, what I'll do is I'll roll my rain jacket. I have the Solomon, the Bonatti rain jacket.
Mhm.
So what I'll do is I'll roll it up and I'll tuck it inside its own hood,
Yeah.
stuff that in there. Everything in the back of my pack is zip locked. So my medical pack, my blister pack, all of my emergency foodstuffs are all in one quart bag Ziploc. So that's in one piece. So I know where that is. And then everything else, my battery, my cables, that's all, in another box. My vest does have a whistle, and then I have my Garmin inReach on the front. So that was stuffed into the top. Normally, what I do is in the pockets, I'll have my phone on one side, and then I'll have bars on the other side, one flask with a filter so that I can filter water, and then the 1.5 liter bladder in the back. So with that, the pack, when I picked it up, I was like, man, this thing is heavy. But once I put it on and started running with it, it really held its weight well. I was able to kind of cinch it down around me so it wasn't moving around much, but I didn't realize, or it didn't click over to me that I was carrying as much weight as I probably was. But I knew that I was going to need this. So I was trying to pare it down to be as light as possible, but still cover every possible situation we could run into.
That's fantastic. And just a good takeaway there. I do the same thing as using Ziploc bags, especially for your jacket or your base layer. Because if it does rain, it's nice to pull out a dry piece, So I agree, put everything in Ziplocs. My InReach, another great feature of InReach is the tracking feature. If somebody is at home, significant other, kids, they can track you online, which is awesome. And you can set up how many pings you give, how often. In other words, how many points of tracking, so it doesn't waste the battery as much. You can set it up for longer intervals or shorter intervals, and it just kind of pings and sends the satellite signal and gives them a pinpoint to where you last were when it pinged. So
Right.
yeah, Garmin is that InReach is great for that. My wife has a peace of mind when I'm out there because she can track me the whole time. There's always the Find My on your your iPhone where she can see me if I'm in reception. And there's always Strava too. You can always send live tracking to different people through Strava if you have the premium feature. So different ways to kind of track you and allow people to watch your progress and make sure you're okay. But yeah, the inReach, it's solid because it sends out via satellite, so it's getting out as soon as it has the satellite, it will send out a bunch of pings, which is it's rare that that it does not. So some
Right.
good stuff there too.
Yeah, I
Uh,
learned the Ziploc bag trick from you.
it really is handy. I love pulling out dry stuff because if it's raining and I'm soaking wet, it's great to just have it, something dry. It's like, oh, thank goodness. But yeah, great point there. All right. So, Art Loeb itself, as you said, this is a gnarly, tough trail. Talk about your pacing strategy. What was your pacing strategy going into this?
Yeah. So I originally reached out to Carrie and kind of asked her what her thoughts were and said, I really want to take this on and I don't really care about time. I know it's a longer distance. I know there's a lot of elevation and I'm just curious what you think would be a good pace. Well, Carrie said, I've never done it in under 12 hours. I said, okay, that sounds good. So I got with the group and ran some numbers, looked at some of my other runs that I've been tracking, and was thinking, I wanted to maintain between 15 and 20 minutes a mile, considering elevation, and that's not counting for gap. So I know that I ran the Cold Mountain 30K in 4 hours and 6 minutes. Thanks to some really good coaching and training, I was able to PR my last half marathon, which was the Asheville half in March. I ran a 157.23. That's down from 214 previously.
Awesome.
So looking at the different runs that I do and really learning how to run slow and maintain that zone two, zone three pace, I really thought to myself, with the elevation, 15 minutes a mile would be probably the best case scenario, with 20 or above being probably more realistic for the group.
Right on. Right on. Did you change your watch feature? Sometimes I have folks that are doing longer runs switch instead of giving the actual mile time, give the average mile time so you can kind of see if you're maintaining your pace. Did you do that or did you just kept it at the actual?
Honestly, when I was looking at the watch, I was monitoring my zones.
Okay.
So I didn't
Time.
even utilize it for the pace itself. I just
Yeah.
kind of went off the feel because I've been running in that kind of zone two, zone three now for a couple of months, and my body has a really good understanding of, okay, I can tell when I'm in zone two and zone three, and I know what my pace is going to be. So for me, I figured if I could just run that zone two, zone three, then, I'd be well within my pace. I would spot check my pace times. And then Eric behind me, who ran with the group, was telling me, number one, you're at an hour time to eat, and this is our average pace. So, I would be in the front pacing off my zones. Eric would be behind me telling me when it's time to eat and what our average pace was. So then I could back it down or I could
Yeah.
kick it up. And it was just really dependent on the group. We didn't have a set pace. I had a personal goal. But ultimately I was there for the group. We all decided to run this at the same time. We all wanted to, achieve this goal, which is a lofty goal. And I've had several people from the community reach out to me and say, that's impressive, Art Loeb, for your first 50K and northbound. And I said, yeah, well, I've been told that's the approved direction. So I figured I would do it. But Carrie did point out, when I asked her, I said, what do you think the elevation is for Art Loeb northbound? And she's like, oh, it's 6,400 up, 7,400 down. And I was like, okay. So I went on Trail Forks and kind of planned the route, and that kind of bounced a little bit. I didn't realize that we were going to get almost 6,400 feet just by getting up to Silvermine, and that we were going to have almost 9,200 feet at the end.
Yeah.
So I decided to look at the FKT website, just to kind of look at the numbers.
Yeah.
And the numbers on the FKT website were a lot more accurate than anybody else was saying. So FKT was spot on. I think we were 9196 up and 8,064 down.
Nice. Nice. One piece on the nutrition. I know you had Eric in your ear telling you when to eat, but just trying to throw in little gems here and there for everybody. You can use a timer on your watch too. So if you know what your interval time is, you can set that as your timer, and then before you go into GPS mode, start your timer, and then when that goes off, it's just a reminder, time to eat.
Um,
Also a good reminder of have I drank, and
right.
especially if you're alone, because then you're not doing the mental math. Like, it's one less thing to think about. It will beep. So you can take your mind off of that. You don't have to waste your time or your energy thinking on when was the last time I ate, when's the next time I need to eat.
Exactly.
So yeah, right on. So it sounds like pacing was going well because you guys were feeling good. Were there any problems along the way? Did you guys have anything that you ran into? Did anybody get hurt? Anything like that?
No, nobody got hurt.
Good.
Um, I think I think pilot was a lot more than a lot of people had thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
So we had two people drop at Silver Mine.
Okay.
Um, that I can understand that. This was certainly not an easy undertaking.
Oh no. Oh, by any
Looking at
means.
the elevation profile just from the Davidson River to Silver Mine it's huge.
Yeah.
There was a lot going on. There was a lot of up. Um, you know, uh, the people that dropped at Silver Mine, it's I don't want to say it was disappointing. It wasn't disappointing. They did an amazing job. Anybody who can get to that, who can hit a 30K on that section of trail in 6 hours,
Yep.
that's a feat. I
Oh,
mean, that's
totally.
huge.
That's where most of the elevation gain was that whole section right there. I mean, you
Yeah.
hit most of your elevation by the time you've hit that point. I think that's already like 7,000 feet of gain by that point. So,
Yeah.
over the course of what, 17 miles, I think that's a
Yeah, it
feat.
was, I think we were 18 and some change when we
Okay.
hit Silver Mine.
That's incredible.
But yeah, I mean, the views at the top of Pilot were worth the climb, and it was a
Absolutely.
challenge. But man, oh man, I really found, just for me personally, getting up Pilot and trying to remain motivated and positive. So Eric and I were joking with each other, and Mike Howell, we were joking with each other going up because I told Mike, I'd made a comment. I said, "Man, we can't be much more mountain than this." And so Mike kept reminding me of that as we were going up Pilot. And Eric said, "Man, do you think they can make these switchbacks any tighter or any shorter?" And we got up to about the fifth or sixth switchback, and I just looked back at Eric and said, "Just had to open your mouth, didn't you?"
Oh
So
my
it's
God.
just those little things to kind of keep you motivated and keep your mind off of it. I mean, you dip into these kind of highs and lows on these runs, and I don't know if it's if it's your body telling you something, or that you need to eat, or if you're just in that mental state. But I find that what works for me is talking while I'm running, and just having conversation. Or Eric and I love to throw dad jokes at each other, and it keeps the mood up, because
Yeah.
then people are, they kind of get into it, and it's funny. So yeah, I think that's important, because that run can beat you down. It
Mm.
really can. There's a lot of climbs in there where you look up, and I'm leaned over in a 30-degree angle trying to make it up this, and the calves are screaming, the quads are screaming, and everything is screaming, and we're just having a good time. So
That's great.
I thought about, we got to this really low point on Pilot where we stopped, and I thought, man, I wish I had the opportunity to log into my phone and just play a snippet from Jump in the Line, and then that way everybody can kind of pick up their mood. And I was like, man, that would be cool. So I just started humming it, and Eric said, "Are you humming Jump in the Line?" And I said, "Yeah." He's like, "From Beetlejuice?" And I said, "Yep." So he started quoting the movie, and that got us all the way up to the top. So it's just a good way to get people's minds off of what you're doing. Um,
Yeah.
I find myself, when I'm out on just my regular runs, I'm planning different loops in my head as I'm running. Um, the next loop that we have coming up on the 11th is going to be my version of Cradle to Grave. So
Okay.
it's not going to be as long as Cradle to Grave. So we're calling it Cradle to Morgue. Um, so that's going to be fun. But I was thinking about that loop while I was doing Art Loeb. I
Right.
try and
Yeah,
keep my mind busy.
that's good.
So
That's good. Yeah, and Cradle of the Grave, for those that aren't familiar, it was an old race here, kind of stopped right around COVID. But it was a 30K, and it started at the Cradle of Forestry at the Discovery Center, and ran up to Pilot Rock. Gave you kind of a view if it was a nice day, and then returned down to the Fire Road and back through the Pink Beds Loop. It's a nice route, and
mhm.
it's on plenty of Strava uploads. So if you search Cradle to Grave, you're sure to find it. But yeah, that's a really cool loop. Some really beautiful trail for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and kind of talking about the trail, Pilot is grueling. Just a tough climb. It just hits you hard. And then you come down the other side, and then you have to go all the way back up, not only to the parkway but past the parkway, to get yourself up to Silvermine and to Black Balsam.
Right.
That's such a tough one after coming off of Pilot.
Mhm.
Um, not quite as tough as Pilot, but still demanding. But the section that always gets me is coming down to the Daniel Boone camp, because you know it's there, and you know it's
Uh-huh.
coming. You can hear the sounds from the camp, but you
Right.
can't see it. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's like you come around the corner and you're looking, hoping, and you're like, nope, not it yet. And it's just like mentally, it just seems like it takes forever. And oh my goodness, it's I don't know if it's just, I guess it's just my patience at that point are just so thin that I just want to finish. And it just it just seems like it takes so long. And it's a
Yeah.
downhill too, so you're like, oh my gosh. And you'd love to run it as fast as you can, but it's still pretty technical. There's lots of rocks and roots, and the trail kind of gets a little bit narrower in spots. I've kind of slipped off because there we had people coming by. I remember this one time we had a group coming up from the camp. They were hiking up probably to Cold Knob, and it was just this line of people, and we're trying to get by because it's just this line of people, and there just wasn't enough trail, and I ended up sliding down the bank, and I'm looking up at everybody, and they're like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I'm fine. You guys just go ahead. I'll climb back up when you get past." Because I mean, and Black Balsam, I don't know if you had the experience, but I mean, everybody loves Black Balsam, and usually the crowds up there just get so massive between that Black Balsam area and Tennant. There's just a lot of people that are hiking, and again, sometimes the trail is like super thin, like the laurels are on each side, and you have nowhere to go. Did you experience any of that?
Yeah, so I will absolutely agree with you that the 3.8 miles from Cold Mountain Gap to Camp Daniel Boone is the longest 3 miles I have ever run in
Yes.
my entire life. That trail never ended. It seemed like I absolutely agree. You come around the corner and you're like, this has got to be it. We've been running forever.
I
And
know.
it's not. And then you
Yeah.
make another turn and it's the same. You're like, oh, this has got to end. But the cool thing that we saw going up Black Balsam is people were asking us, "What are you guys doing?" Oh, we're running the Art Loeb, and they're like, "You're running the whole thing," and they're like, "Yeah." And people were high fiving us and cheering us on. Stopped up at Black Balsam, got some pictures of the trail sign, and then turned and started running down the trail towards Tennant. And actually ran into a friend of mine who I run with on Monday nights, and he just came back from a trip to the Himalayas. He was running in Nepal,
Wow.
and he saw me on the trail and high fived me and messaged me after and said, "Didn't even know you were doing this today. Congratulations!" So it's funny how small the community is, but going down Black Balsam and then getting up to Tennant, same reaction. People are like, are you running this?" And they're like, "Yeah." they're like, well, how much farther do you have to go? And we said, Camp Daniel Boone, we're going to the end. So it was neat to be able to talk to those people. And,
Yep.
I got a chance to run stuff that I hadn't run before. I think my favorite section was after you get out of Ivester and start climbing up into Shining Rock
Yeah.
and you're in that overhead high blueberry patch and you're going up to, was it stairs?
Yep.
Um, Absolutely amazing. And just probably one of the most prolific, beautiful sections of trail. My favorite section of trail on that entire run.
Nice. Yeah, I like the narrows, getting up on that kind of ridge back, and you have the views
Yeah.
off either side.
Yep.
It's super technical, it's tough, and if you're tired, it's frustrating because you're like, oh my goodness, is this a trail? But
We actually spooked a bear at the Narrows.
oh my goodness.
Yeah, we
Wow.
we came up over the really big rock at the top,
Hmm.
dropped back into the trail and started running down. And it sounded like somebody dropped a 16-foot log out of the sky in the bushes to the right, in the blueberry bushes. And I turned and I looked down into the brush and you could see a black bear standing there. And I was like, hey, bear, hey, bear, hey, bear. And it just looked at us as we went by. And I said, well, we're just passing through. We'll,
Yeah.
have a good day. And we
Uh,
kept going. But it was weird. That was the only wildlife sighting that we had. I thought we would have seen more. I saw a
yeah.
lot of chipmunks, lots of birds, got one bear. Um, yeah, it was super cool. It was nice to be able to enjoy that and
Yeah.
kind of see those areas.
Two other spots. One's not far after the Narrows, and it's just before you get to the Cold Mountain where you drop down to Boone. But there's two real kind of evergreen groves. One is
Mhm.
on your way up to the Parkway. So after you've come down Pilot, past the shelter at Deep Gap, and start going back up, there's just this beautiful pine grove section. I don't, for whatever reason, I just love pine grove stands. And then the other one, like I said, right before you get to the Cold Mountain Junction,
Mhm.
there's lots of trees down, kind of in that section of Shining Rock. When you kind of get through, there's kind of a nice grade, and then you start to go down a little bit as you're getting towards Cold Mountain. But there's lots of trees down, just because that's primarily that's wilderness area, and you're not allowed to bring any type of chainsaws, and it's also it's deep in there. It's tough to get to, so you have to bring crosscut. So it takes some really hardy souls to get to those trees. So they've been down for a while. But
Yeah.
I love those two sections. I don't know, just I find peace in those sections. I don't know if it's because of the way that the sunlight kind of filters through, especially it's usually and you may have hit it at a different time of day, but the time of day that I usually hit it, it's just a soft light, which is, I don't know, brings a sense of serenity and peace. It's always nice, especially right before you hit that downhill that we both loathe so much. But those are two of my favorite sections. But for those that are thinking about the Art Loeb, um, talk about your water points. That's always an area of interest. We kind of touched on that. There is the capability to filter. Talk about the different filter points that are available to folks.
Yeah, so depending on when you go, depending on the time of year, water points can be scarce. We were fortunate. There's really good water all the way up to basically Gloucester Gap. We were able to fill at the Butter Gap shelter. There's a
Mhm.
pipe spring,
Yep.
really, really good source, very well done. Just before that, when you hit Cat Gap and John Rock, there's a stream there that you can filter out of.
Mhm.
That's a good point. So from those 2 points, that sustained us for getting up to Silver Mine where we had sag. We were able to refill at Silver Mine.
Yeah. There's one
Um,
more point before that if folks are in need at the Deep Gap shelter.
oh,
Um,
a Deep Gap, yeah.
yeah, there's one more point there. There's a little spring that comes out of the hillside. If you're looking at the shelter itself, it's off to the
Mhm.
right. You'll see a user trail that brings you right to the head of the creek, and you can
Oh,
filter
yeah.
there.
Yeah, my favorite water point was up in Shining Rock,
Yep.
where it looks like it looks like you come out on an old road and there's
Right.
giant pieces of granite, quartz,
Yep.
just like spread all on the road,
Yep.
um, through
That's the
this,
Shining
like
Rock.
you said, like a pine forest.
Yep.
We got, I mean, I could hear the water. It was coming down the side of the mountain off of a flat rock, into what was like quartz scree underneath it. Probably the most beautiful water point I think I've ever seen.
Nice.
But you could get the water coming right off of that flat rock, and
Yep.
it was absolutely amazing.
Awesome.
I thought, I thought we would need more water than we did, but because I think we started out, it was 47 degrees. We hit the parkway and it was 39 degrees and blowing 25 miles an hour. So all I wanted to do was eat my food and get back up into the trees.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, the water was good for that section. I would just, like you had mentioned, bring more than you think you're going to need because you never know. You never
Right.
know if, there might be something wrong with the water point. You never know if, something may have happened and you need more water, or you get injured and you need to be out for longer, or you
Sure.
sprain something and you're going slower. So
Yeah.
yeah, I tended to fill up even if I didn't need it.
Yep. Just be prepared what you get up to that Black Balsam Point because you are exposed. He was talking
Hmm.
about how windy it was. It's just, the you're out of tree line once you get up to Black Balsam and Tennant and all that, and it takes a little bit of a while till you get back into the woods. So be prepared. Watch your weather. It's anything can happen up there. A front can hit on the other side of that range, so it just really keep an eye on the weather. Especially check it when you get up to Pilot. Top of Pilot, you usually have a little bit of service. So it's a good point to kind of just recheck your weather and make sure nothing's moving in on you because there could have been nothing on the radar and all of a sudden something evolved. So just be careful and be mindful of all of that. But
Definitely.
um, that was awesome, Jeremy. So it took you a little over 12 hours, which that's fantastic, especially for Art Loeb and your first 50K. It sounds like you had a number of others finish. Was that their first 50K or had some
Yeah.
done a 50K prior?
Yeah. So Mike had done a 50K prior. This was my 50K. Juanito's first 50K. Max Martinez was running with us.
Nice.
He had run before. Eric, first 50K. Austin had done a 50K before, and it was Bruce's first 30K.
Cool.
So a lot of firsts for a lot of people.
That's
So
awesome.
that's kind of the impetus of the Sunday Run Day Fun Day group. It's like
Yep.
getting you to get out there and do something that you wouldn't normally do because you can do it.
That's for sure. That's awesome. That's a great place to kind of wrap up, man. Do you have any final thoughts beyond what you just said? Because, like I said, what you just said was very poignant, and it
Yeah.
is true.
Yeah, definitely. If I could say something to everybody, it's just go after what you want to do. Don't ever discount your ability or your skill because the only thing holding you back is you. Don't ever do it for anyone else. Do it for yourself.
Well, fantastic. I will put the Sunday Run Day Fun Day group into the show notes. But any other ways that folks can connect with you?
Yeah, obviously I'm all over Facebook. Feel free to reach out. Aaron's got my number if anybody wants to go for a run. I got a good chance to run with Connor. So if you want to run slow, by all means, come out and run with me. I do runs out in Bent Creek all the time. I'm always running for the Monday night NCMTR group run, and I run Wednesday nights at Archetype for the pub run with Just Running. So uh, say hi. You can't miss me. I've got trees tattooed on my legs.
Awesome, Jeremy. I really appreciate your time, man. Thank you, and congratulations on your first 50K.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Well, congrats to Jeremy on finishing the Art Loeb Trail, and for just being so willing to share his journey with us. I really enjoyed talking to Jeremy about everything he did and his preparations, and it was great to get to know him more. I love getting to know my athletes and hearing more about their past. So, in a way, this is wonderful for me as well. So anyway, here in my world, I've begun work on transitioning the brand, trying to come up with a new name for my coaching services and podcast. MR Runningpains stemmed from when I did events, putting on events, and the idea behind it, it's, as I've talked about in the past, it came from a different place, but it doesn't quite represent who I am or what I do now. I'd like to have a little bit more cohesion with what I do and all what I offer, and how I do things. So I'm working on it. My athletes have been brainstorming with me. My wife and family, we've been brainstorming new ideas. If you have ideas, I'd love to hear from you. What this podcast means to you, what it's brought to your running, ideas you have for possibly, renaming, rebranding. I wanted to have more of a positive feeling to it, because that's what I try to bring to running, is positivity and joy. So that's what we're trying to do, is create a new name that will kind of represent everything I do a little bit better. So stay tuned. We're working on it. It's going to be a work in progress. I'm sure, nothing that will come about before Western States, but it's on my mind. I kind of stop and think about it quite often, out walking the dog, going for a run, etc. It's definitely something on my mind. So, but anyhow, so working on that. And as I said, Western States is coming up. This episode is going to release on, Thursday, June, 8th, I believe. And with that said, from this weekend, I will have 2 weeks until Western States, which is incredible. It's like, it can't say it really snuck up on me, but for sure, it's coming up quick, and I'm excited for it. People are saying, "Are you getting excited?" Well, it's not really that I need to get excited. I need to stay calm. It's just this, obviously Western States is one of those races where you're been trying to get in it for so many years and be a part of it. So I'm just grateful for the opportunity. So far as training goes, after that 30 miler or whatever it was, where I did out and back on shut-in, I needed a little bit of downtime, just listening to my body. So, a few people kind of commented that I disappeared from Strava for a few days, and I just needed a few days off. I just needed to recoup and let my body recover a little bit. I had basically 250Ks 2 weekends in a row, and that was a lot. And I told my coach I just need some downtime. And last week I had a friend reach out. His daughter is an amazing runner. She's steeplechasing, and he asked me if I could help her learn some things about the steeplechase and get her ready for the Adidas National Meets in Greensboro, North Carolina. And that would be, June 17th, I believe. So I was more than happy. It was awesome to meet with her, and she has such great energy. And just, teaching steeplechase again, I missed that event so much. It was just reinvigorating, and I had, not that I needed inspiration, but it really lit me up again and made me excited. And it's just, such a great feeling to work on helping somebody, trying to get to, go to nationals. She's already qualified for nationals and going. So, but try to work on some of the finer points of steeplechasing and making sure she understands how to do the water pit, what we're looking for when we're hurdling, in between hurdles, pacing, all these different things that go into the steeplechase. So that's been a lot of fun. I've been really enjoying that piece of coaching. And I mentioned last week, unfortunately at this time I am not accepting any new clients. I do have some friends that are, so if you're interested and want me to connect you, by all means, reach out. I'm sorry, I don't have the bandwidth right now to take on any new runners probably after Vermont. So, if you're looking for maybe August, I'll have some space for any runners interested in coming on board at that time. But right now, like I said, I'm just, I'm really, I'm in a good place with my coaching. I'm trying not to lose sight of my athletes training, but at the same time, get everything together for Western States and Vermont, since they're so close together. So I just don't feel I would do any new athletes justice at this moment, coming on board anyway. So like I said, if you want to wait till after Vermont and have a conversation, or even reach out to me now and say that you'd be interested after Vermont, which is mid-July, and come on board in August. I'm happy to have that conversation. But yeah, like I said, as of right now, I just don't want to take on anybody new, but it's wonderful. Man, good spot right now. Like I had a run yesterday and just took it really easy. Not really wanting to push. I could still feel some fatigue in my body, but I had done a lot of outside work the day before, cutting down a tree and moving it and mowing, and so I was a little bit tired from all that. I could tell at the end of the day when I was done with the yard work, I was pretty whooped. So I knew it would kind of wear me out for the long run, but had a good long run. Found a new trail, which was awesome. It looks like it's been there for a while. But I never would have known it was there until I just ran by and saw, an entrance into the woods that I had never noticed before. So I decided to explore that yesterday. Always so fun to find new trails and check them out. Really enjoyed that. So, but yeah, everything else is great here. As always, if you have any questions or comments or things you'd like for me to answer on the podcast, please reach out. The next week, I'm trying to line up a special guest, an old friend, who's also a coach, and we'll see if that works out. So stay tuned for that. The week after, I'll be doing, a Western States preview. That will be right before Western States. So I'll record a podcast. I'd love to have, my kids and family and crew and pacers on and kind of talk about, pre-Western States and the environment that we see and everything else. And then the following week will be a Western States recap. So, so stay tuned for that. That's kind of the agenda moving forward. So, but I hope your running goes well. And until we talk next time, keep running, my friends.